comes from the family education sessions. It's also something you can use one-on-one with family members. So it's titled Communication and Relationships. So a big part of the work that we do with family members is talking about communication styles. And when I do this in a group setting, I draw on the whiteboard and I draw 6 circles just like I've drawn up here. So I explain that we typically communicate in 3 different ways: as a parent, as an adult, and as a child. So I'll just write those right up there. And then I'll explain, or I'll ask the group to give me some ideas of how children might communicate. Typically they say things like through their emotions. They might say things like explosively, and I'll get all those words up there. They might say through manipulation. Once again, I'll put it up there. And then in the handout, in the family education sessions, we've added some words like uncertain, timid, sulky, impulsive, immature, self-absorbed, dependent, explosive, or unpredictable. But I typically go with whatever the group gives me, and we're trying to get some words up here that might explain how their loved one is probably communicating while in active addiction. But I don't go there with them just yet. But I'll fill that circle up with lots of different words. And then I get them to explain to me how a parent might communicate. And typically I get 2 different responses. One might be kind of authoritative, bossy, demanding, parental, and then I also get people explain that they might be over caretaking, over nurturing, over helpful, and words like that. So I put them both up there because it actually really helps when we look at some of their responses to their loved one. And then I get them to explain how an adult communicates when they're being healthy. And typically we explore words like being assertive. I use the word neutral a lot. Calm, rational. For those who are comfortable with DBT, we can bring in wise mind. So the balance of our logic and our emotions, and fill that circle up with all those type of words. So in the material from family education, under parent, we have critical, coercive, nagging, demanding, controlling, evaluative, blaming, finding fault or judgmental. And under adult, we have words like able to express what we need, able to express what we want, assertive, calm, neutral, etc. So then I ask the group or the person that I'm working with which communication style their loved one tends to communicate from when in active addiction. And I'm trying to gently guide them to choose this response. Sometimes they'll say that their loved one is an adult, and often that's when they're thinking of them in their non-using stage. They're thinking who they used to be, or maybe how they want them to be again. And typically when in active addiction, they're communicating from a child-like communication stance. So usually I get that answer. So we just kind of have some group time exploring about what that might be like to communicate with someone who might be being explosive, manipulative, demanding, trying to get just their needs met, etc. And then I explore what or how the family member may respond to their loved one if they're communicating from this stance. Typically in the room we have parents, partners, all sorts of loved ones, and they're here in regards to someone who is probably not a child. Even if they're 16 or older, we kind of explain that they're not a young child and therefore not in that stage of life, and yet continue to communicate in that way. I remind people that we all communicate from all three of these different styles at different times in our life. If I'm hungry, I might be more prone to communicate like a child, and that's very normal. But their loved one is probably stuck communicating from this stance while in active addiction and how exhausting that can be. Then I explore how they might respond to someone who's stuck in this communication style. And typically I get this answer, that they become parental. And then I explore what that might sound like. So if their loved one is stuck in this communication style, they might start becoming parental, even if they're not a parent. Even if they are, they're finding that they're becoming overly parental. So they use words like, I tell them what to do. I wake them up in the morning instead of having them set their own alarm. I pay their bills. I bail them out of jail. I overhelp, over-nurture, over-caretake. And oftentimes, there's some people in the room who find themselves on this side, maybe a bit authoritative, bossy, telling them what to do, and then there's other people saying I actually coddle them and parent them that way. So I get them both up there in terms of responses, and I explain that this is how they get hooked in to communicating when someone's communicating here. They also might get hooked into communicating by matching their behavior. So maybe they themselves start communicating in a child stance. So their loved one might be trying to get their needs met, and they might respond by trying to get their own needs met. Their loved one might be stamping their feet, so then they start stamping their feet. And some of the family members that find themselves in group here at Forecast express that they get hooked into this type of communicating. I would say most find themselves up here, but some do, when exhausted, burnt out, frustrated, find themselves down here. And we normalize that. We get hooked in, we respond to people's unhelpful communication styles with our own unhelpful communication styles. Then I ask the family members how that's working. Typically, they'll talk about being exhausted, frustrated, feeling like it's Groundhog Day and the same conversation is happening over and over and over again. So then we explore what it would be like to respond to their loved one from an adult communication stance. So their loved one might be stuck in a certain communication style, like we said, typically down here, and we can't control other people, we can't make them change. Like we say, the 4 C's, I didn't cause this, I can't cure this, I can't control them, but I can take care of myself. So what can I do? I can stay an adult. So they might scream, they might kick their feet, they might demand, but I'm just staying over here in neutral. And then I spend a lot of the group talking about what would that sound like? How might I communicate when I'm in my adult stance? So one of the big things that we do is win statements. So win statements sound like this. When you, I feel, and I need. So this is a very assertive way of communicating, staying in neutral. When you leave your clothes on the floor, I feel hurt, neglected, betrayed. I need you to pick your clothes up off the floor. Or maybe we negotiate and decide that the clothes get picked up once a week, etc. Sometimes we add a wink, which is a consequence. And if you don't pick your clothes up off the floor, the laundry may not get done. So some people choose to add that C for a wink statement as a way of staying an adult, despite where or how their loved one is communicating. Okay, so when we talk about communication with family members, we give them a chapter from In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Gabor Mate, chapter 33. And oftentimes I will just read them a little paragraph from the chapter just to kind of get them curious, and then we give them that chapter to take home with them. So the little quote that I read from the chapter is, much of our stress comes from mentally living out of our own business. When I think, you need to get a job, I want you to be happy. You should be on time. You need to take better care of yourself. I am in your business. I realize that every time in my life that I felt hurt or lonely, I'd been in someone else's business. If you are living your life, and I am mentally living your life, who is here living mine? We're both over there, being mentally in your business, and this keeps me from being present in my own. I'm separate from myself, wondering, why doesn't my life work?